Hey everyone, welcome back to Window Seed Studies. I hope you all are doing well. So we were discussing about immunology, and in today's lecture we are going to discuss about inflammation. So inflammation is a really interesting topic, and we are going to discuss about inflammation in detail. I'll be talking about its role, I'll be talking about its physiological impact, the causes of inflammation, as well as the type of inflammation. So we started this immunology series where we discussed about the immune system, the types of immune system, the innate immunity versus the adaptive immunity, right? We also discussed about the cells of immune system, the cells which are either part of innate immunity or the adaptive immunity. We also discussed about the organs of immune system where those cells, the cells of immune system, they are going to get generated and mature, and they are going to have a microenvironment to initiate the immune responses. So we talked about immunity, the innate as well as adaptive immunity. We talked about cells of immune system as well as the organs of immune system. And in last class, we discussed about cytokines, the mediators of the immune system. So today we are going to discuss about inflammation. So I just wanted to discuss those few topics before starting the discussion about the activation of innate immunity or activation of adaptive immunity, right? We have just discussed about the characteristics of immune system, but we haven't discussed about how they get activated and what are the different signaling pathways which are going to help in the activation of those immune pathways. So we will discuss about complement system, we will discuss about PAMs, TAMs, the PRRs, right? And but I wanted to discuss a few topics before that discussion because these are important and these terms will be helpful in the future lectures. So we already discussed about cytokines, the mediators, and in today's lecture we are going to discuss about inflammation. We'll also discuss about skin in upcoming lectures as a different organ, as the barrier of the innate immunity or the barrier which protects the individual from the pathogenic attack. So let's get started with the lecture. So inflammation, it is a complex process. It is the biological response which is characterized by activation of immune as well as non-immune cells. So inflammation, it is an evolutionary conserved process. So it has been conserved and it is an evolutionary process. So it is characterized by the activation of immune and non-immune cells. Well, those activation of immune and non-immune cell, that is important for the protection. Okay, so when the immune cells and non-immune cells, they are going to get activated, they are going to protect the host from the various type of infections such as bacterial infection, viral infection, and even from the toxins. But there's a really nice characteristic about inflammation is that usually for protecting the protecting the host from the pathogenic attack, we activate the immune system. So the host immune system is activated. But inflammation is a really unique conserved biological response in a way that not just immune cells are going to activate and result into inflammation, but non-immune cells are also responsible for inflammation. And inflammation just not just occurs when when there's pathogenic attack or toxins, but it is also triggered by some unfavorable living or non-living identities, or it is also triggered by tissue damage. So this is not just when when the pathogen attacks on the body, but it is also when the tissue is damaged due to certain injury. Okay, and the tissue will be repaired and healed. So we can say that inflammation, it is the biological complex biological response which is activated due to activation of immune or non-immune cells, which is going to result into maintaining the homeostasis, eventually clearing the pathogen from the body of the host, or clearing that or the repairing the tissue, or clearing that tissue damage. It is eventually regaining the state or the homeostatic state of the individual, and that is why we refer inflammation as healing procedure as well, because it is resulting in the tissue healing, the wound healing, right? So inflammation is really unique and it is a really complex process. So the earliest documented descriptions about inflammation, they were found they were found in back in the history by a Roman physician called Cornelius Celsius. So Cornelius Celsus was the first person to document about this phenomena, which is inflammation. So when this Cornelius Celsus, he was Roman physician, and he actually gave, he actually characterized the inflammation. So he gave us the signatures of inflammation, the physical signs of inflammation. So if those signs, those check boxes are ticked, this means that particular area is inflamed, or the host is, that person is experiencing inflammation. So he actually documented the signatures of inflammation. So he documented that in Latin words. So he said that Ruber et tumor cum calor et dolor. So these are the Latin words. So this gives the signatures of inflammation. So for example, whenever there's inflammation, the inflamed area will get red. So there will be redness, there will be swelling with heat and pain. So that signatures of inflammation, they are documented in the Latin words. So rubor basically means redness. Okay, so inflammation has those signatures. The redness in the inflamed area, tumor means swelling. So redness, swelling, redness and swelling, they will come with the heat and pain. Okay, so these are the signatures of inflammation. So earliest documentation was done by Cornelius Celsus, and after that, to add on this, there was a scientist known as Rudolf Virchow, who gave that besides those signatures. Okay, so Rudolf Virchow. Okay, just a second. He told that he documented that besides rumor, tumor, calor, and dolor, besides that, there's also functio lysa. Okay, besides those, there's also other signature of inflammation known as functio lysa, which is basically loss of function. So the function of the body or the function of that particular system will be disturbed. There will be loss of function due to the inflammation. So loss of function is also a characteristic or a signature of inflammation, right? So these are the ways that by which we are going to characterize inflammation, this biological response. But how does inflammation occur, and what is the physiological impact of inflammation? Let's learn about that. Okay, so I have discussed this in brief in previous lectures as well, but I'm going to quickly summarize how inflammation occurs. So assume that a person is being infected by some bacteria, or a person has been infected by some virus. Okay, so whenever there's infection, okay, there's wound or infection in that particular area, that pathogen in that tissue will be residing in that area, right? So when there's tissue infection, or I mean infection in that particular tissue, the vascular system, the blood vessels at that point of time, they are going to result into, the cells in that tissue, they are going to excrete those vasodilator, which is going to result into the vasodilation of blood vessels. So let's assume that this particular tissue, okay, this particular tissue has pathogens in it. Okay, so there will be tissue resident immune cells, right? We have discussed this in particular lectures about the cells of immune system. So the tissue resident mast cells, let's assume that those are the mast cells. Okay, so those cells, they are going to release the factors such as, let's say, prostaglandins, or let's say histamine. We have discussed about those, right? So when they, when the histamines or prostaglandins, they are released by those mast cells, the tissue resident cells, the tissue resident cells of immune system. These are basically vasodilators. Means these are the factors, these are the reagents which are going to dilate the blood vessels. So they are going to result into vasodilation. So vasodilation upon infection, basically it will result into rushing the blood cells at the site of infection, right? So whatever blood vessels are there, they are lined by the endothelial cells, right? So these are the endothelial cells, okay, lining the blood vessels. So this endothelial cells, the gap between the endothelial cells, that will increase, right, due to the vasodilation, and that is going to result into the whatever blood is there that will rush at the site of infection. So blood will rush at the site of infection. This will result into, this will result into heat, because blood vessels are widening. So widening of blood vessels, that is going to cause heat in that particular area, okay. And when those, those, these are vasodilators, but they also affect the permeability of the blood vessels. So the permeability of blood vessels will be increased, and this increased permeability will also result into oozing out the fluid, okay, the plasma, the blood plasma, that will ooze out, and that will, that will enter in the tissue, the infected tissue, as the interstitial fluid, okay. I mean, that will go and reside there, which will be eventually drained in the as lymph in the lymphatic vesicles, right? So whatever fluid is being oozed out from those blood vessels, that will cause, swelling in that particular area. So accumulation of this fluid will cause swelling in that area, and besides the fluid, the leukocytes, the cells of immune system, they are also going to escape. They are going to do the extravasation, or we call it diapedesis, and they are going to get released into this infected area. So release of those blood cells, that will cause redness there, okay. So redness and swelling will be there due to due to the spilling of the contents of the blood vessels. And now this, this will start. So all of those activated cells of immune system, they will secrete the cytokines, they will secrete the mediators, which are referred as inflammation mediators. So those inflammatory mediators are histamines or prostaglandins or some cytokines. So those inflammatory mediators will be released by those activated immune cells, as well as the non-immune cells which are residing in this tissue. And once this inflammatory mediators, they are released, they are going to attract other immune cells, and all of those immune cells, the macrophages, or the other cells of neutrophils, let's say, because neutrophils are the first ones to arrive at the site of infection. So neutrophils, the macrophages, okay, so they are going to phagocytose this pathogen, and this is how the pathogen will be cleared from that area. So this inflammation, once the inflammation occurs, to maintain the homeostasis, to come back to the normal state of the body, to maintain that homeostasis, the fibrosis will be seen, means scar formation will be there. There will be pus formation as a result of inflammation. So, besides those leukocytes, the platelets will also escape from this blood vessel, and that platelets, they are going to surround this infected tissue, infected area, forming the pockets of the, pockets of pus, or pockets of activated immune cells, okay, which are going to do their job. So which are known as abscesses, okay. So this pockets of the blood, these pockets of the pus, sorry, they will be formed by the platelets, okay, and this results into clot formation. So basically the platelets will be forming a clot in there, so that the pathogens, they will be localized, they will be immobilized in that infected area, and the infection doesn't spread over the body. So as a result of inflammation, there will be scar formation due to fibrosis, or there will be, pus formation. So basically the pus is yellowish fluid which is there in that particular area, which contains all those dead microbes, or those dead cells. So that pus will be there as a result of the inflammation, and this inflammation is going to recover the body to its homeostatic state, right? So once the pathogen is cleared, the body will return to its homeostatic state. So what are the causes of the inflammation? So what causes this inflammation? Okay, yeah. One more thing, when those, those leukocytes, they do the extravasation and they enter in this area. So basically they are activating and they are releasing the inflammatory mediators, right? So those inflammatory mediators, they will also cause tissue damage, okay, if the, they are, the level of those immune mediators is very high. So that but when it is low, instead of tissue damage, it is going to cause some tenderness in the tissue, and that tenderness in tissue will result into pain. And this is how all those different characteristics, they are they are the signatures of inflammation. So the tenderness will be caused due to the escape of those, escape of those leukocytes from the blood vessels into the tissue, as well as the inflammatory mediators. So these are the four, the four characteristics or the four signatures of inflammation, and this is the physiological impact of inflammation. So this is what will happen: the heat, swelling, redness, and pain will what happen in the system. But besides those, so this is, very localized response. Inflammation is a localized response, it is going to occur in that particular tissue. But besides this, besides those signatures, there are some systemic effects of inflammation as well. So systemic effects, basically, by systemic effects I mean that these are the effects which will be seen all over body, such as fever. So inflammation also causes fever. So fever is a global response. The temperature of body will be increased due to the hypothalamus. So there will be some, some cytokines such as IL-1, IL-6, or the TNFs, tumor necrosis factors. So these are the ones which are going to act on hypothalamus, which will increase the body temperature. So besides those signatures, so even though inflammation is the localized immune response, but it is going to result into some systemic effects. So those systemic effects, first I discussed, is fever, and this is also, result into leukocytosis. So leukocytosis means the increase in the numbers of the leukocytes, such as the neutrophils number will increase, the numbers of lymphocyte will increase, number of eosinophils increase. Let's say there is bacterial infection, then the neutrophil number is going to increase. If there is viral infection, then the new lymphocytes are going to increase in number, and if there is parasitic infection, then the number of eosinophils will increase. So this increase in number of leukocytes is referred as leukocytosis, which is again a systemic response due to the inflammation. So this is a systemic effect of inflammation. And if the infection is very, it is very severe, so in the cases of severe infection, sepsis will be seen. So basically, sepsis is uncontrolled systemic inflammation, which is going to result into shock, even in the multi organ failure. So these are some effects of inflammation, which are seen in all over the body. So even though inflammation is a localized response, it is going to have some systemic effects. Fever, I discussed, leukocytosis, as well as sepsis. Okay, so there's a really nice way to my professor discussed this, and he taught me this. A really nice way to discuss about the inflammation is that I have also discussed this, I've mentioned this in many of the previous lectures, discussions, that the state of living, so an individual is alive, that means that particular individual is maintaining its non-equilibrium state, right? So by leaving, so the dead person, it has equilibrium. Okay, so to increase the entropy of this environment, sorry, to increase the entropy of the universe, we are basically maintaining the non-equilibrium state. So maintaining the non-equilibrium state means the person is alive, right? So this, but that doesn't mean that whatever responses that are going to occur in body, they are extreme. No, there will be certain range of those responses to maintain the non-equilibrium state. So we can imagine this as a pendulum. Okay, so let's assume that this is a pendulum and it is at rest. So when this pendulum is at rest, this means it is at its equilibrium position. Okay, so this is the equilibrium position of pendulum. This means that particle, it is not, in the equilibrium state, it is at rest. This means this can be analogous to a dead person, the person who is not at the equilibrium state, it is at rest, it is not moving, right? I mean, it is at the equilibrium state. So if there, that person, so for an individual to remain alive, the non-equilibrium state should be maintained. So this pendulum, it should have a simple harmonic motion, so it should oscillate to and fro, and the range will be decided. So let's say it oscillates in this particular range. When it oscillates in this particular range, then we call that, okay, then we refer it as the, okay, let me just draw it first. Okay, so this is the particular range which is given for the non-equilibrium. So these are the non-equilibrium positions, right? So these are the non-equilibrium positions. So pendulum is moving to and fro only up until certain range. So this range, this particular range is known as homeostatic range. Okay, so this is homeostatic stage. Okay, so we can say that homeostasis is maintained by the organism. So the homeostasis is basically, it's a non-equilibrium state, but there the environment is at optimum. The internal environment, it is at optimum, right? So homeostatic stage is the non-equilibrium stage into up to the certain range, right? But let's say due to certain incidences such as infection, okay, such as infection by bacteria or virus or any microbe such as parasitic infection, this homeostatic state, the optimum state, that will be disturbed. And once it is disturbed, this means that the pendulum is going to, it is going to oscillate in a range which is much more higher, which is wider compared to this homeostatic range. So the range now increases for the oscillation of this pendulum. This particular range is really not harmful, but it is showing that the optimum stage, the homeostasis, is perturbed. So this is referred as physiological inflammation. Okay, this is not really harmful, but it is really important, because whenever there is infection, the normal, the whatever optimum stage was there, it is disturbed. And now, so imagine this as the pendulum had a simple harmonic motion in this range, in this particular range. Okay, and now you apply force on the string in this in a particular direction. So this external force is acting as a perturbation in its simple harmonic motion, and this range of the previous range, it will be changed to this particular range, right? In the same way, whenever this perturbation, the external disturbances such as infection or even the tissue damage, the wounds, that is going to cause this range to deviate from the homeostatic range to the range which is referred as physiological inflammation. So this particular phenomena is known as physiological inflammation, but this is not really dangerous. In fact, it is very helpful for clearing that pathogenic attack, or for for the tissue recovery, so that tissue will be recovered, damaged tissue will be repaired, and whatever host was going whatever pathogenic attack was there in the host, that will be cleared. And once the pathogen is cleared, the physiological inflammation, that will be, that is going to, inflammation is going to clear out, and that is going to result into homeostatic condition. So individual will go back from the inflammatory state to the homeostatic state. So the clearance of inflammation is, it is possible when there is physiological inflammation. Means, assume that there is only a little force, you are applying little force on this pendulum, so the range will increase, okay, but after some time the range, it will come back to the normal, into the simple harmonic motion, okay, into the state of homeostasis. So the state of homeostasis, it is perturbed by the external factors, external pathogenic attacks, means the infection. And once that state is, once that state is disturbed, the inflammatory mediators are going to get secreted. Okay, but let's say that due to certain reasons, that inflammatory mediators, the release of inflammatory mediators goes out of the hand. So means it is very high, there is no check over the secretion of those inflammatory mediators, over the secretion of those cytokines, the TNFs or the histamines or prostaglandins. These are the immune mediators, inflammatory mediators, right? So those inflammatory mediators, when they are secreted in a really enormous amount due to the severe infection, or let's say due to mutation as well, when that occurs, that is going to result into inflammation, which is really hard to clear. Okay, so the now individual won't be able to achieve the homeostatic state again, so it won't be able to recover and get into the optimum stage of homeostasis. So this particular this particular inflammation is known as pathological inflammation. So let's say that you apply too much force, okay, and the pendulum starts, having the motion from this range to this range. This particular state is known as pathological inflammation. Okay, so pathological inflammation, it occurs it is really a dangerous situation which could be even fatal sometimes. Okay, so physiological inflammation, it is easy to clear out, so inflammation will be cleared and the individual will recover to its optimum stage at achieving the homeostasis. But clearing pathological inflammation is really hard because there will be persistence of inflammatory inducers. So those inflammation inducers, they are, they are being secreted persistently, and they are causing inflammation again and again, and that is going to result into pathological inflammation, which is really hard to clear. And the basically there could be some, some mechanisms, some pathways which are being hampered, which are going to hinder the inflammation elimination. So this is a dangerous condition. So this is how you can, imagine how the inflammation is a really important response, which is going to help in healing of an individual. But if it goes out of the hand, it can also cause some, some problems in that individual. So there are two types of inflammation, based on the intensity of inflammation as well as the duration of inflammation. The first one is known as acute inflammation. So acute inflammation is one which has short duration. So it lasts for the short duration, but the intensity of this inflammation is very high. Okay, so the pain will be high, the intensity of this inflammation will be high. But the moderate or low intensity inflammation, which lasts over, over a long time, even for years, is known as chronic inflammation. Okay, so chronic inflammation is the one which stays for longer duration. So if you have to imagine it by a graph, let's say this is the intensity of inflammation and this is the duration of inflammation. Okay, so the acute inflammation will have graph like this because the intensity is high, okay, but the duration is low, whereas the chronic inflammation will look something like this. Okay, so the intensity is quite low compared to the acute inflammation, but the duration is long. So clearing out the acute inflammation is easy, but chronic inflammation can cause severe damages. So sometimes the granulomas are, that they are collected in that particular infected area. So that particular subtype of chronic inflammation is referred as granulomatous inflammation. Okay, so granulomatous inflammation is a subtype of the chronic inflammation where the granulomas will be collected. So granulomas are basically collection of those activated immune cells, such as, let's say, activated macrophages. Okay, they will be collected at the area, and those macrophages, they will be surrounded by activated lymphocytes, and this cluster of the immune cells, this collection is known as granulomas. So a lot of granulomas, they will accumulate when the inflammation is chronic. It goes on for a longer time, and such type of inflammation is known as granulomatous inflammation. So this granulomatous, it might even contain the multinucleated giant cell in those clusters. So this is really a very harmful really harmful situation for the individual. So acute inflammation is easy to clear out, whereas chronic inflammation lasts long. So with this, I have discussed about inflammation, signatures of inflammation, the role of inflammation, as well as the types of inflammation. So we are done with this lecture. In next lecture, we will discuss about skin as the barrier, as the part of our innate immune system. We'll also start discussing about innate immunity, the humoral part of innate immunity, as well as the cellular part of innate immunity. So we have to cover the complement system. We have yet to cover the PRRs, the PAMs and DAMs. We have to cover the activation of B cell and T cell, and how they, the generation, activation, as well as the responses of the B and T cells. We haven't even discussed about antibodies, so we'll also discuss about structure of antibodies, their functions, the types of antibodies. So I'm done. I conclude the lecture here. Till then, see you. Bye bye.